All right, so today we're diving into a story that feels like straight out of a political thriller.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Tulsi Gabbard,
Right.
former Democratic presidential candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's Trump's pick to lead all the U.S. intelligence agencies.
I know.
As Director of National Intelligence.
That's crazy.
It's a wild turn of events.
Yeah.
And, you know, you guys sent in a ton of articles about this whole thing.
Right.
Accusations of being a Russian asset, a dropped lawsuit against Hillary Clinton, ties to a secretive Hawaiian cult.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
So let's try to unpack this systematically.
Okay.
You know, your initial reaction of fishy as hell is understandable, given all the controversies surrounding Gabbard.
Yeah.
But to really understand this appointment, I think we need to sort of dissect her political evolution.
Okay.
Examine those Russian asset claims.
Right.
And then delve into the influence of this Science of Identity Foundation.
You're right. Jumping to conclusions isn't going to help us here. So let's rewind a bit. Gabbard started as a Democrat, even ran for president in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
When did things start to shift so dramatically to the right?
Well, the turning point
seems
to be when she left the Democratic Party in 2022.
Right.
And she don't just leave quietly. You know, she really denounced them publicly as an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness.
Wow.
And since then, she's been actively endorsing Republicans, even those who support the idea that the 2020 election was stolen.
Yeah. This has left a lot of people scratching their heads.
A lot of people.
Including some conservatives.
Yeah.
Why would the GOP embrace someone with her history?
Right.
Especially considering these Russian asset allegations.
Exactly.
That's the part that really grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
Didn't Hillary Clinton suggest she was a Russian asset back in 2019?
Yes, back in 2019.
And then Gabbard sued her for $50 million.
That's right. Clinton implied that Russia was actually backing Gabbard's presidential bid.
Wow.
Even calling her a Russian asset. Gabbard filed that defamation suit, but ultimately dropped it in 2020.
Okay.
But she maintains that Clinton's comments damaged her reputation.
It's like something out of a spy movie.
It is.
But what fueled those accusations in the first place?
Right.
Were they just politically motivated attacks?
Well, it's a complicated story. Some point to Gabbard's controversial foreign policy stances.
Okay.
Particularly her 2017 meeting with Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad.
Right.
This, coupled with her later comments downplaying the threat from Russia and questioning U.S. support for Ukraine, really raised red flags for many.
And it didn't help that she was often praised on Russian state TV.
No.
Even referred to as Tulsi, our friend.
Yeah.
I can see why people were suspicious.
Oh, yeah. That kind of attention from a hostile foreign power is definitely going to raise eyebrows.
Right.
However, Gabbard insists her foreign policy views stem from a non-interventionist stance.
Okay.
Arguing that U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts often does more harm than good.
Okay, so we've got this backdrop of controversial foreign policy views and the Russian asset allegations.
Right.
But then there's this whole other layer, the Science of Identity Foundation. This secretive Hawaiian cult led by a guru named Chris Butler.
Yeah.
It sounds almost unbelievable.
It's certainly a less discussed aspect of Gabbard's life, but potentially very significant.
Okay.
Former members described the group as homophobic, anti-Islamic, and misogynistic.
Wow.
With Butler holding absolute authority. Gabbard's own aunt, Dr. Caroline Sonavayana Gabbard, claims that Tulsi's entire political career has been shaped by this group and their desire for power.
Wow. Her own aunt.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bold claim.
It is.
But Gabbard denies any undue influence, right?
She does. She maintains she's grateful for the spiritual practice that Butler provided.
Okay.
But insists that she makes her own political decisions.
Okay.
However, the secrecy surrounding the Science of Identity Foundation makes it really difficult to fully assess their influence.
So we've got this web of accusations, political maneuvering, and a secretive spiritual group.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
It is indeed. And now with Trump appointing her to head U.S. intelligence, all of these concerns are magnified tenfold.
It's a move that seems designed to shake things up.
Oh, yeah.
But what's the real strategy here?
Right.
Why would Trump choose someone with so much baggage for such a sensitive position?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Some speculate it's a calculated move to appeal to those who share Gabbard's non-interventionist views.
Okay.
Others suggest it's more about rewarding her loyalty and willingness to attack the so-called deep state,
Right.
a term often used to describe a perceived unelected bureaucracy working against Trump's agenda.
So is she a savvy political operator navigating this complex landscape?
Yeah.
Or a pawn in a bigger game orchestrated by others?
That's the question, isn't it?
It's almost impossible to tell at this point.
It's hard to say definitively, but to understand the potential impact of this appointment, we need to take a closer look at the role of the Director of National Intelligence.
Okay.
And the challenges that Gabbard might face.
That makes sense. This isn't just a symbolic position.
Yeah.
It has real consequences for national security.
Absolutely. The DNI is responsible for coordinating the activities of 18 intelligence agencies.
Wow.
Ensuring that the president receives accurate and unbiased intelligence assessments and safeguarding national security.
It's a demanding role with immense responsibility.
It is.
And one that will put Gabbard under intense scrutiny.
Oh, yeah.
Especially given her history.
Absolutely.
I can only imagine how heated those confirmation hearings are going to be.
They're likely to be quite contentious.
Yeah.
Democrats will undoubtedly grill her about those Russian asset allegations, her ties to the Science of Identity Foundation, and her qualifications for the job.
Right.
Even some Republicans might have some reservations.
It sounds like this is just the beginning of a long and complicated story.
Indeed, Tulsi Gabbard's trajectory from Democrat to Trump's intelligence chief is a story full of twists and turns, and it's far from over.
Right.
To fully grasp the implications of this appointment, we need to dig deeper into her background, her political evolution, and those controversial foreign policy stances.
Let's do it. Let's unpack this puzzle piece by piece and see what we can uncover.
All right. Okay, so let's rewind a bit and trace Gabbard's path to this point.
Okay.
Her political career began in the Hawaii House of Representatives,
Right.
where she served from 2002 to 2004.
That's right. She started young.
Yeah.
And then she joined the Army National Guard in 2003, eventually deploying to Iraq.
Her military service is often cited as a key part of her background. She rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve and received several commendations.
Right.
This experience undoubtedly shaped her worldview and likely influenced her foreign policy positions.
Speaking of which, her foreign policy views have always been a bit outside the mainstream. Even when she was a Democrat. What were some of the early signs that she wasn't exactly a typical Democrat?
Well, even during her early years in Congress, representing Hawaii's 2nd District from 2013 to 2021, she expressed skepticism about U.S. military intervention abroad. This put her at odds with many in her party, who generally supported a more interventionist approach.
And then there was that controversial meeting with Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad in 2015.
Absolutely.
That really raised eyebrows.
Yes. At the time, Assad was widely condemned for his brutal crackdown on the Syrian uprising. Which had spiraled into a bloody civil war. Gabbard's decision to meet with him was seen by many as a sign of poor judgment and a willingness to engage with unsavory characters.
Didn't she defend the meeting by saying it was important to engage with all sides of the conflict?
She did.
Okay.
She argued that dialogue was essential even with those considered enemies.
Right.
But her critics countered that meeting with a dictator like Assad legitimized his regime.
Okay. And gave him a propaganda victory.
That meeting seems to have foreshadowed her later shift towards Russia.
There's definitely a through line there.
Okay.
Her skepticism of U.S. interventionism, coupled with her willingness to engage with authoritarian figures, really set the stage for her subsequent embrace of positions often aligned with Russian interests.
And her criticisms of U.S. support for Ukraine further solidified that perception.
Precisely, in the lead-up to and during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Gabbard repeatedly questioned the wisdom of providing military aid to Ukraine, arguing that it would only prolong the conflict and risk escalating tensions with Russia.
Those views, combined with her repetition of Russian propaganda about U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine, led to accusations that she was actively aiding Russia's war effort.
And those accusations weren't coming from Democrats. Some prominent Republicans like Mitt Romney also condemned her statements, calling them treasonous lies.
So her stance on Russia really alienated her from both sides of the aisle. It did, and it's important to note that these controversies surrounding Russia are central to understanding the potential risks associated with her appointment as DNI.
Because the DNI plays a crucial role in shaping U.S. policy towards Russia.
Exactly. The DNI is responsible for providing the president with objective and accurate assessments of threats posed by foreign adversaries, including Russia.
Right.
If Gabbard were to bring her personal biases or pro-Russian leanings to the role, it could have serious consequences for U.S. national security.
It raises concerns about whether she would be willing to challenge the president's views on Russia, even if those views were based on faulty intelligence or influenced by foreign propaganda.
That's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
The DNI must be able to act independently and provide unvarnished assessments, even if those assessments contradict the president's preferred narrative.
It's a lot of responsibility for someone with such a controversial history when it comes to Russia.
Indeed, and it makes those confirmation hearings all the more critical. Senators will need to probe her views on Russia deeply.
Yeah.
And assess whether she can be trusted to make unbiased judgments about national security threats.
Let's hope they don't shy away from asking the tough questions.
They shouldn't. The stakes are too high.
Yeah.
The DNI is a critical position, and the person in that role must be someone who puts the interests of the country above all else.
It's a position that requires a deep understanding of the intelligence community.
Yes.
The ability to manage a vast and complex bureaucracy, and the judgment to make sound decisions based on often incomplete or conflicting information.
And perhaps most importantly, it requires someone who is immune to outside influence and pressure.
Speaking of outside influence, let's circle back to the Science of Identity Foundation.
Okay.
This secretive group has been lurking in the background of Gabbard's story.
Right.
And it's a factor we can't ignore.
It's an aspect that deserves further scrutiny,
Yeah.
especially given the potential implications for her role as DNI. While Gabbard denies any undue influence from the group, their secrecy and the allegations from former members raise serious concerns.
Her aunt's claims that they've been grooming her for power for decades are especially troubling.
They are, and even if we take Gabbard at her word that she makes her own decisions, it's impossible to know the extent to which her worldview has been shaped by the group's teachings.
We know very little about those teachings other than the allegations of homophobia, anti-Islamic sentiment, and a rigid hierarchy with Butler at the top.
That lack of transparency is a major red flag.
Yeah.
It's difficult to assess the potential risks associated with her ties to the group without a clearer understanding of their beliefs and practices.
It's almost like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Yeah.
We have these glimpses into their world, but the full picture remains elusive.
And those missing pieces could be crucial to understanding Gabbard's motivations, her decision-making process, and her potential vulnerabilities as DNI.
The Senate Intelligence Committee has their work cut out for them. They need to delve into this carefully and get to the bottom of it.
Absolutely. They need to determine whether Gabbard's ties to the Science of Identity Foundation pose any risks to national security.
Right.
And they need to assess whether she would be able to withstand any pressure or influence from the group if she were to become DNI.
It's a delicate balance.
It is.
On the one hand, we want to respect her right to privacy and her religious beliefs.
Of course.
But on the other hand, the stakes are incredibly high.
The DNI must be above reproach.
Right.
There can be no question of divided loyalties or undue influence from any outside group, especially one with such secretive and potentially controversial teachings.
This is starting to feel like a classic spy thriller.
It is.
A complex web of political intrigue, foreign influence, and a secretive organization pulling strings behind the scenes.
It certainly has all the elements, and like any good thriller, it's keeping us on the edge of our seats wondering what will happen next.
Will Gabbard be confirmed as DNI?
Yeah.
Will her past catch up with her? What role will the Science of Identity Foundation play in all of this?
Right.
We're left with more questions than answers.
And that's what makes this story so compelling.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that reality is often stranger than fiction.
Right.
And it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of hidden agendas and the importance of transparency in positions of power.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
How do we make sense of this complex and often contradictory figure?
To understand Tulsi Gabbard, we need to look beyond the surface.
Okay.
We need to examine her political evolution, her foreign policy stances, her ties to the Science of Identity Foundation, and the motivations behind her appointment.
And we need to ask the tough questions.
We do.
Questions about her judgment, her loyalty, her ability to act independently, and her commitment to serving the interests of the country.
These are questions that deserve careful consideration.
Right.
And the answers will have far-reaching consequences for the future of U.S. intelligence and national security.
It's almost as if Tulsi Gabbard is a walking Rorschach test. People see in her what they want to see.
Right.
projecting their own fears and anxiety onto this complex figure.
Absolutely.
She's been labeled a Russian asset, a pawn of a cult, a right-wing opportunist, even a future presidential contender.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
But beneath those labels lies a human being.
Of course.
With her own motivations and beliefs, shaped by a unique set of experiences.
Right.
And one of those experiences is her deep involvement with the Science of Identity Foundation.
Yes.
It's an element that can't be ignored.
Yeah.
Especially given her potential role leading U.S. intelligence.
Let's delve into what we know. Yep. And more importantly, what we don't know about this organization.
Right.
It's been described as a secretive cult.
Right.
But what does that actually mean in practice?
From the sources you provided, it seems like former members paint a picture of a group that's very controlling.
Yeah.
With a rigid hierarchy and a charismatic leader, Chris Butler, who demands absolute obedience.
Right. And there are reports of homophobic and anti-Islamic teaching. Wow.
Which raise concerns about potential biases influencing Gabbard's worldview.
Right.
Remember, her aunt directly linked the group's ideology to Tulsi's political positions.
Yeah.
Even claiming they've been orchestrating her rise to power.
It's chilling to think about.
It is.
Imagine a powerful intelligence agency.
Right.
Potentially influenced by the doctrines of a secretive group.
Yeah.
But hasn't Gabbard denied any undue influence from the foundation?
She has.
Okay.
Gabbard maintains that she's grateful for the spiritual guidance she received from Butler.
Okay.
But insists that she makes her own political decisions.
Right.
However, the lack of transparency surrounding the Science of Identity Foundation makes it really difficult to assess the extent of their influence.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
It is.
We need more information to understand the nature of this group, their teachings, and how they operate.
And that's where those confirmation hearings will be crucial.
Right.
The Senate Intelligence Committee has a responsibility to thoroughly vet Gabbard.
Not just for her qualifications, but also for any potential conflicts of interest or undue influence.
They need to ask the tough questions.
They do.
About her relationship with Butler, the group's doctrines, and whether those beliefs could impact her decision-making as DNI.
Exactly. They also need to examine Gabbard's past statements and actions.
Right.
Especially regarding Russia.
Yeah.
Is she truly a Russian asset, as some allege?
Right.
Or is her stance on Russia rooted in a genuine belief in non-interventionism?
These are questions that can't be brushed aside.
No, they can't.
The implications for U.S. national security are simply too great.
They are.
The DNI must be someone who can be trusted to put the interests of the country first.
Absolutely.
Regardless of personal beliefs or allegiances.
Agreed. This isn't about partisan politics. It's about ensuring the integrity and effectiveness of U.S. intelligence.
Right.
The DNI needs to be someone who can analyze information, objectively resist outside influence, and provide the president with unbiased assessments, even when those assessments are difficult or inconvenient.
It's a tall order, and one that Gabbard's appointment has thrown into sharp relief.
It has.
Her story, with its mix of political ambition, controversial foreign policy views, and ties to a secretive spiritual group, is a reminder that power is often wielded in the shadows.
It is.
And it underscores the importance of critical thinking, asking tough questions, and demanding transparency from those in positions of authority.
Absolutely.
So what's the takeaway for our listener today?
Yeah.
What should they be thinking about as they follow this unfolding story?
I would encourage them to look beyond the headlines and the partisan rhetoric.
Okay.
Examine Gabbard's record, her statements, and the evidence presented. Don't be swayed by labels or assumptions.
Right.
Form your own conclusions based on a careful consideration of the facts.
And remember that this story is far from over.
It isn't.
Tulsi Gabbard's journey from Democrat to Trump's intelligence chief is a reminder that the political landscape is constantly shifting. Keep your eyes peeled, stay informed, and never stop asking questions.
Great advice.